Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're working on a smaller end grain chopping board with a few extras. The idea of this little board would be to have something smaller and lighter when entertaining. As an example, if you were hosting a party and needed to cut some lemons for a drink, you could bust out this little guy. It's short, it's stout, it's ready to party, so I'm calling this one the Little Chubby. So this project began with a trip to my local hardwood dealer. I knew I wanted to do another chopping board project, but I wanted to work with something a little different. So the gentleman at the store recommended some of this curry. It's quite rough, but there was a piece that had been milled up on site that I could see, and it was a beautiful colour, and it was quite cost effective to boot. So in my haste to grab a piece that was cost effective and beautiful, I didn't pay much attention to the fact that this was the least square piece of wood I've ever picked up. And just to add a little salt into the wound, apparently today is the day my dust collector just didn't want to play the game, so it made a pretty good sized mess. You would think to yourself that I would have checked these reasonably closely, but you'd be wrong. There are heaps of cracks to work around, and I'm going to lose a fair bit along the way. But that's okay, I have more than enough for this little chopping board. As well as being quite rough, this stuff is really hard. I know I only have hobbyist machinery, but getting this through the table saw and planer is a slow process. I'm only nibbling off about 1.5mm per pass through the planer. I've never really worked with anything like this before, but I'll take my time, take it slow, and we'll get there in the end. With and force through the planer, I can jump back over to the table saw to rip it down to final width. And that was rough, but it looks like we finally have something square enough to make a start. I'll play around with the pieces a little and flip every second one to give a bit of pattern from the grain. Because we're only using one wood in this project, all the style is going to come from the way we manipulate these grains. I thought I was pretty clever here. I'm pretty bad for letting glue go all over my clamps and I really need to stop. So I did think to myself, food doesn't stick to greaseproof paper, maybe glue won't? Stick around to see if I'm as clever as I think I am. It's the next day and the glue is dried, so we can pop it out of clamps and head over to the planer again. We just need a few light passes to get everything nice and flat so we don't have any gaps in the finished board. Making a board this small makes the task really fast, with the added bonus that we have very little planer snipe because the panel we're using is a lot shorter than normal. So with everything nice and square, I can cut my slices that'll make the finished board. I'm cutting these ones quite thick. I want the board to be as tall as possible without looking weird. So I'm cutting these ones at about 55mm or 2¼ inch. I'm going to need about 12 slices to have enough surface area to be able to trim this one down into a square. My target size for this one is about 270mm or 11 inches square, so this should be enough to get us there. With our slices cut, we can do our final glue up. I'm going to pay close attention to the grain orientation here and flip every second piece to give us that natural pattern wood grain look. With it all laid out, I'll hit all the pieces with some Type Bond 3 and get it into clamps. Now my paper thing worked pretty well on the last glue up, so let's see if that works again. With the glue all set up, I'll just whip off this paper. Well, apparently not. Non-stick my ass. And I have the added bonus that I wasn't able to wipe off the excess glue before it dried. So I'm not chalking this one up to a win, and probably just need to use tape like everyone else and stop trying to be clever. And off to the drum sander we go. I'll run this one through, flipping it over between passes to try and limit the heat build up, trying to prevent this one from warping. My amazing paper idea has made this a bit awkward, as in it's a bit of an extra layer to have to remove, but I guess you don't know if you don't try. square off one side on the miter saw, and then run it through the table saw to make this one into a perfect square. With it the same length on all 4 sides, I'll add a bit of a chamfer to try and make this one look a little taller. 17 degrees seemed to feel about right. The design idea behind this is that I want the board to look quite stout. We're going to add some little brass legs, so the small amount of shadow that will come from this will hopefully add some depth and draw your eye into the brass. With all the chamfers cut, I can pop over and bring the finish up a little. So I'll start off with 60 grit and then move on to 120. With everything smoothed out to 120 grit, we can give this one a quick blow off with the air compressor, then wet the board down to raise the grain and leave it to dry. It never ceases to amaze me how fuzzy these things get when you wet them down. The feeling gives me shivers up my spine, kind of like eating off a bamboo spoon. And now that we've all heard about my insecurities about eating off wood, we can move up to 240 grit and get it to its final finish. With all the sanding done, it's feeling really nice, so I can apply a generous amount of mineral oil. Now this wood seems super dense, and it isn't taking in a lot, but I'll apply a few coats and leave it to soak it up over the next day or so. And over to the lathe we go. Here I have a piece of 30mm or 1.25" brass round stock. I'm simply going to face one end and drill a 6mm or 1/4 inch hole through the center. And then part them off at 16mm or 5/8 to give us our little legs. Then I'll pop in a heavy countersink so I can make sure the screw heads don't protrude past the bottom of the feet. I'm sure that would make it really rocky. With the pieces cut, I'll give them a little bling on the buffer and give them some shine. Now I know I could have gotten these a lot shinier, but I didn't want them super shiny, just enough to accent the wood without looking tacky. With the legs all finished up, I'll pre-drill some holes evenly spaced on each corner and send them home with some brass screws. I'm not sure why I felt the need to use brass screws. Maybe I was feeling fancy that day. Now that all 4 feet are attached, I have these little 1" or 25mm stick-on non-slip pads. I'll just stick them on over the screws. I don't know how long these will last, but if they come off, they're really cheap to replace. And we're close now. I'll add a good amount of carnauba wax and leave it to set for a few minutes, and then buff off the excess to give it some sheen. And there we go. I know this isn't the biggest or craziest board ever made, but I think it's a cool little project that could take pride of place in any kitchen, and something a bit different if you're just needing a small board. The combination of the legs and that heavy chamfer around the base make it really easy to pick up and move around, and gives a real point of difference. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. See you on the next one.